Today is the first of 3 episodes on a single argument. Personal development fails when you fail to take into account how your brain functions. There are 2 systems sharing the same skull, and one of them runs without your direct control or consent. This series is about understanding those 2 systems and learning how to train the one that runs almost the entire show. By the end, you will have a complete model for how real behavioral change happens through simple, repetitive protocols designed for the brain you actually have. Hey there, it's me, Core, and you're listening to Exercising Consistency, from fitness to flourishing. Cognitive psychologists call these 2 systems the dual process theory. It divides all cognition into 2 modes. System 1 is fast, automatic, and subconscious. It operates beneath your awareness, executing learned patterns without asking permission. It's the reason you can drive home from work and realize you remember nothing about the drive. You were not unconscious. System 1 was handling it. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and conscious. It's the voice you hear when you think. It handles novel problems, weighs options, and makes intentional choices. It's the part you consider your self. The relationship between these 2 systems determines nearly everything about your behavior. Most people assume System 2 is in charge. It's not as simple as one or the other. System 1 is the default. It handles the overwhelming majority of your daily actions. System 2 only activates when System 1 encounters something it does not have a preloaded response for. And even then, System 2 has severe limits. Your conscious mind can hold roughly 4 chunks of information in working memory at any given time. That's the ceiling. This limitation has consequences that most personal development advice ignores. When your method requires 5 steps, your brain freezes. Anxiety rises. You have exceeded your working memory. And System 1 learns nothing from a jammed signal. The plan fails and you conclude you lack discipline. You do not lack discipline. You exceeded a neurological constraint that does not care about your intentions. This is why simple rules outperform complex programs. Not because simplicity is philosophically elegant, because it respects the hardware. System 2 can only focus on one thing at a time. When you ask it to manage more, it drops something. And this can be the thing you most wanted it to hold. This brings us to what people call self-sabotage. The term suggests malice, a part of you working against your own interests, a hidden saboteur. That framing is not only a poor metaphor of what's happening, it creates an imaginary complex of problems that complicates what's necessary to move forward. What behavioral science and neurobiology reveal is far simpler. Your non-conscious brain has one primary mandate: survival through energy conservation and threat avoidance. To your System 1, the familiar is safe, even when the familiar is miserable. The unfamiliar is dangerous, even when the unfamiliar is a positive goal. When you procrastinate on a difficult project or avoid a workout, your brain is not trying to ruin your life. It has coupled that action with an expectation of discomfort, negative judgment, or failure based on past conditioning. It is executing a highly successful avoidance protocol to protect you from what it perceives as unwanted consequences. That is not a moral failing. The impulse to avoid is amoral because you, the choosing self, can't instantly control this reflex. It's conditioning doing exactly what conditioning does. It's a physical neural pathway built by input. While the initial avoidance protocol is a biological mechanism rather than a moral failing, choosing whether or not to change that conditioning is where morality applies. Once you become aware of this conditioned impulse, your subsequent conscious choice matters. You decide to let the habit rule you or choose to override it as an exercise of agency and personal responsibility. In contrast, the psychoanalytic tradition, rooted in Freud and Jung, taught people to dig for hidden conflicts and buried drives, to excavate the unconscious for the origin of their dysfunction. The problem with this approach is that it cannot be falsified. Karl Popper, an Austrian-British philosopher of science, celebrated for his concept of falsifiability in the scientific method, used psychoanalysis as the textbook definition of pseudoscience. If a patient agreed with the analyst was right. If the patient disagreed, the patient was, in quotes, in denial. A theory that cannot be proven wrong cannot be scientifically proven right. Modern behavioral science has moved on to actual evidence-based methods of behavior change. Cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. These approaches treat the brain as an organism with conditioning that can be systematically retrained through simple, repetitive action. The problem is mechanical, which means it can be fixed. So, good news. You are not fighting a personal demon or uncovering a psychological wound. You are working with a system that learned a pattern in response to triggers in the environment and is running the pattern on repeat. System 1 responds to training. That means you don't need to figure out what happened to you that resulted in the pattern, or why that pattern and not another, or any other psychobabble. You just need to decide on the result you want and how you will train yourself to fire a new pattern in the same circumstances. That is the work. In the next episode, we move from diagnosis to method. The 3 phases every skill must pass through on its way from conscious effort to automatic execution. Why your protocol must be written down and locked in for 84 days. And the single most important rule for programming System 1. 1 cue at a time. The student is ready. The trainer has to show up. To exercise consistency and become the person who trains System 1 well, whatever the circumstances, join the ACT Score Challenge. That's it for today. Catch you next time.